75.
Hello and welcome to Udstødt, which means, translated into English, disfellowshipped. My name is Frank Flemming Jensen and I've been doing this podcast / YouTube channel for about a little over 2 years with a Danish angle on the Jehovah's Witnesses, especially here in Denmark, and how to recover from their teachings. And of course, it has been in Danish all the time, and I've been making a little over 120 episodes now. So this is something that I'm not used to do in English. So please, you have to bear with me with my English and my trying to find the words sometimes. But I've been thinking a lot about doing some English interviews also, especially with people who have some insight on the Jehovah's Witnesses, and not only information about Jehovah's Witnesses, but also how to recover from their toxic religion as it is, in my opinion. So how can we help people coming out of Jehovah's Witnesses, having a lot of doubt, having a lot of mental issues, and trying to get over it and create a new life? And therefore, I've been thinking about doing it also in English, and invite some people who know some things about how to recover from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And today I'm looking forward to have a very special guest. It's Jonam Tullio Ross, who lives in England, and he's sitting in the waiting room right now. So let's just invite him inside. And here he is, Jonam Tullio Ross. Welcome, Jonam.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I've been looking forward to talk with you. Actually, can I ask you here in the beginning, that name, Jonam, is that a typical British name?
No, it's not a typical anything name. It's a Bible name.
Oh.
Yeah. My parents were witnesses. I was raised in the organization, and my mum wanted a Bible name, but she didn't want just a normal Bible name like Matthew or Luke or John or one of those. But she didn't want something so weird that it was Nebuchadnezzar or one of those. So she settled in the middle for a Jonam.
It's very close to Jonah.
Do you know, that's
yeah.
One of the really cheesy ways I get people to remember it, because people forget my name, or people often struggle with it. So I'm like, look, you know, Jonah and the whale. I'm like Jonah, but I'm more delicious. So there's an at the end, and that just spread like wildfire.
That's a good way to do it. Then people will remember your name, Jonam. Oh, that's good. And I can see that you live in, as I would say, pronounced in Danish, Leominster, but it's pronounced Leominster.
Yeah, in the UK we don't speak properly. We so that there are loads of unnecessary letters in words. But yeah, in a little town called Leominster, which is spelled Leominster. So in the depths of the Herefordshire countryside. But I was in the organisation in Lincolnshire growing up, which is on the east coast, and then I spent a couple of years in London as well.
Okay, so you're not staying in the same town as you grew up as a Jehovah's Witnesses?
No, that would be horrible, I think. So yeah, I managed to get out of the town.
Yeah, wouldn't it that? Because that's a thing that I'm talking with a lot of my guests about, that get out of that old town and move to a bigger city. Get away from all that Jehovah's Witness indoctrination and the people that you know from your congregation you can see every day. Get away from that town.
Yeah, the years of conditioning and years of associations. And in therapy, there's a kind of joke that we make, which is where someone can come to you or come to me as a hypnotherapist, and we'll do fantastic work in the session and get rid of all their problems. And then they go back home and they sit in the same spot on the same sofa, looking at the same TV that they've been depressed in for the past 15 years. And all of those old patterns come bubbling up because it's conditioned into them at that point. So yeah, changing the environment to support our mental and emotional growth as well is really important if we're able to do it.
It is. It is. And that's quite interesting that you have a story, former Jehovah's Witnesses, and now you have been taking some classes and educated yourself as a hypnotherapist. And today you're actually helping people from recover from Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
A
great.
complete turnaround.
That's a yeah. So I'm thinking about that we could make a combination of these two. Let's first hear a little bit about your race as a Jehovah's Witnesses and how you got out and what effect it had, and also how you are today and your thoughts about being a hypnotherapist and so on. So let me just jump in it and ask you, how did you become a Jehovah's Witness?
I was born and raised
Wow.
as
What
yeah,
a surprise!
yeah.
Is it the
They
same thing?
tend to be.
Is it also your thoughts about it that in Denmark since the 1970s, almost 95% are born in? Is that the same in Britain?
I don't know the numbers, but that seems true from the congregations I've known. Most of the new converts are people who are being born into it for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and your family, were your father spiritual? Was he an elder? How was your childhood?
No, so my parents were witnesses when I was born. My mum was raised in it, and she left, and she got back into it, and she kind of dragged my dad in as well. Well, he met her when she was studying, and then they started studying together, and then they got baptized, I think, together as well. So that was where it started, and they were when I was younger, they were spiritual in the sense of, they read the Bible stories to me when I was still in the womb. It was that kind of a deal, and read the Bible stories as my bedtime stories, and all of that took me to the meetings. But they weren't pioneers and elders; that they didn't have status in the congregation as such.
Okay, so because that a big difference between raising up in a family where the father is an elder and the mother is a pioneer, and the indoctrination is a little bit more harsh. It's stronger. So did you have the possibility to go to soccer, football, and do worldly things in your family?
So my parents got divorced when I was 6 or 7, and and they got disfellowshipped at the same time. So um, my sister and I went and we lived with our mum, and although she was disfellowshipped, she still believed it, but she was just very dealing with a lot of things in her own life. So she didn't get reinstated until about 7 years later. So during that time, I, as the spiritual head of the household, as a 7-year-old boy, I was taking myself or making arrangements to try and get myself to the meetings, and also my younger sister. So I took that responsibility for indoctrinating myself or continuing the indoctrination, and invested a lot in trying to pursue being a Jehovah's Witness. So it was kind of strange. I was home educated partially for the religious reasons, because my mum didn't want us to be influenced by the world outside, but we also lived with a worldly stepfather, so he made things interesting. So it was kind of an unusual background, but I always pushed myself very hard to try and be a witness, because I remember being a small kid. I was maybe 9 or 10, and my younger sister, who's 3 years younger than me, we were sat there. I took her to the meeting. Maybe our grandma was there too, and she was kind of jiffling. She wasn't paying attention, and so I was like elbowing her and say, "Oi, pay attention, because this means life or death. If you don't listen to this properly, you're going to die." And so I was the indoctrinator, really, and in that situation with her. So it's kind of an unusual setup. It's not the usual, raised in and keeping up appearances as such. But at the deep level, I very much believed it.
And it must have been very, very strange for you as a kid growing up and really believe this is the truth, and also believing that your mother is disfellowshipped. Like, if she's not coming back, she's not going to survive Armageddon. What did that make in your mental health at that time?
I got there are a few people actually in the congregation. Some people, I won't name them because it's cruel, but the message to me was very much, get your mum back to meetings or else she's going to die at Armageddon, and Armageddon could come at any minute. And so as a young kid from age 7, 8, 9, I was very I felt this big sense of responsibility for the spiritual well-being of my family. And it wasn't just the spiritual well-being, right? Because it's the physical threat. We think there's going to be a great tribulation, my family's going to get imprisoned, persecuted, tortured, and then maybe killed and executed by God at the end. So I looked at that, and for a while I used to get very upset by it. Around the age of between 10 to 13, I was quite emotional about it, and I struggled to sleep. I had a lot of a lot of breakdowns over it. And my mum's lovely, but she's sometimes not very compassionate. And so she's like, look, these horrible things are happening all the way around the world right now. We're living in relative peace here in the UK, but horrible things happen. Horrible things have happened all throughout history. At least we've got something to look forward to. So we know what's going to happen, and we know that there's some light at the end of the tunnel. So a very, very pragmatic, very practical way of doing it. But the result of that was that, look, fear doesn't have its place here, and these emotions don't belong. And so I ended up becoming very numb, and I anesthetized myself to my own emotions for a long time.
Mm-hmm. But you mentioned that your mother came back and reinstated 7 years after. Was that because of your pressuring? Maybe you took the decision to get baptized? Or what were her reasons to come back?
She always believed it. And the reason she got disfellowshipped was basically that she was forced into the situation where she didn't really have any other choice. And so it wasn't through not believing. It was very much through just circumstance, and she believed. And the reason she stayed out for so long was that she just felt very down about herself. She said, well, if I stay on the ground, then I can't fall any lower, basically. Whereas if I stand back up and make another go of it and try again, I might fall down and be in the same or a worse situation. So that was what kept her in that state. So she was dealing with a lot of mental and emotional issues as well during that time, and the sense of unworthiness and of sinfulness and of being judged and ostracized clearly would not have helped.
No. She sounds like, as we call it today, a pommy, a physically out, mentally in. And there are a lot of people also in Denmark that have been disfellowshipped or trying to sneak out the back door, and still they have the indoctrination in their back head and trying to, it's still the truth, I believe it, and then they will come back. And that's one of the worst situations to stand in, to be disfellowshipped and still thinking it's the truth, and I'm not coming with, not going to survive Armageddon and so on. No, okay, back to you. Did you get baptized?
Yes, I was baptized when I was 17. 17. So not super young, but my main reason for that was that I wanted to make progress in the congregation, basically. I had this belief that the only thing worth doing was being a good Jehovah's Witness until this big genocide comes along. And so although it didn't make me happy and I wasn't getting my needs met, I said, well, this is what I should be doing, so I'm going to go and do what I should do. So I got baptized mainly for the human approval, and it was a very bad decision.
It is. As we see it now, it's a very bad decision. I'm trying to warn people in Denmark, please do not get baptized at least till you are 18. best
Yeah.
25, best never.
Yeah.
But at that time, when you got baptized, did you have any doubts and thinking and trying to push them away and say no, it's still the truth?
I had doubts before. A few years previously, I started researching all these weird conspiracy theories, all of the strange things that you can find online, not about the organization, but the queen's a reptile, and all of this kind of stuff. And I was reading, I'm like, this is kind of crazy. But there was some things which I could verify. I'm like, well, that's true. And so my concept of reality was challenged, and I was like, well, these things are indicating that humanity has been around here for a lot longer than 6,000 years. And there's a lot more that has been happening during that time than certainly what the organization's telling us. So I felt like I was being sold an incomplete story. And so I had this list of questions, and I can't remember what they are now, but I literally got a list of questions together and took them to the elders, to one elder in particular. And I said, look, I need help answering these questions because I'm trying to make sense of whether this is the right religion to be in. And he said, well, you've grown up in it. I was maybe 13 or 14 at that point. And if you haven't figured out whether it's the truth or not, then you need to sort yourself out, basically. It was not helpful at all. Didn't help me research the questions, and just kind of cast me aside and said, find your own way. So that was really the point where I should have stopped going. And for a few months, I did. I stopped going to meetings for about a summer. It was 2 or 3 months. And then the combination of emotional blackmail from my family, specifically my mum, where there's this guilt trip of my children are committing spiritual suicide, and so that was not helpful, combined with the fact that I didn't have answers, right? Because you're going from this state of complete certainty where you have all the answers, so you think, into then saying, well, there's so much I don't know about the world, and there is no single truth, and I've just got to stumble around in the dark, as it were. So those two things came together, and I decided to go back into the organization and double down, have a study, get baptized, and try to commit to it.
Sounds like my story myself. I also had
Yeah.
doubt. Some pretty. You mentioned before there are some conspiracy theory, but if you study Jehovah's Witnesses history, it's one big conspiracy theory, and one of them were the teaching about that Jehovah he examined the world in the years 1918, 1919, and found out there were only one organization on the earth that were the true one. That's I point them out as the Watchtower, and I remember that I was asking him. I was about 13, 14, 15 years old. There was a Watchtower study. How where do I find this in the Bible? Where does it tell anything about the year 1919? And nobody could explain that. And it was a saying that you probably also heard: you have to wait for Jehovah, you have to wait for the answers, and so on. But I was thinking, but it's standing right there in the Watchtower, but nobody could explain it to me. And that's one conspiracy theory out of hundreds.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. And
It is.
and yeah, because we're in that emotional state where, our own lives, our families' lives, there's the emotional element of, the grief that you would cause if you got disfellowshipped. And so there are all of these like chains holding you back from asking those questions or from leaving. So it's very manipulative.
It is. It is. So you were 17 years old when you got baptized. And what happened? How old were you when you decided that it's not the truth? Or how did you get out of Jehovah's Witnesses?
So it was kind of a roller coaster. I first got disfellowshipped when I was 20. That was so basically I got baptized as a way of trying to get my emotional needs met from the congregation. That didn't happen, and it rarely does. And so the thing I ended up doing was finding a relationship, and ended up kind of dating this girl actually from a congregation a couple of towns away. And that was a complicated situation of its own. Ended up committing an act of porneia, and
You have to explain for the listeners what an act of porneia is.
So for the it's a little JW terminology joke. So basically, it's some kind of sexual act, and so they, in the Elders book, they call it an act of porneia, because that's the Greek word that was used in the Bible. And it's any kind of sexual contact with another person, basically.
Porneia is sexual relations involving persons not married to each other. It includes acts such as oral sex, anal sex, and masturbating another person. It always involves deliberate manipulation of the genitals and at least one other person or animal. When a Christian commits porneia, the elders always have to provide assistance.
And so they don't like when you do that. So so we so that then I confessed like an idiot, and went and took myself to the elders and said, "Look, I've done this thing," and then they disfellowshipped me.
But
and
even though did you repent and cry and so on? And
the problem, as they saw it, was that I'd done it a lot, and with multiple people as well.
Wow.
So it showed that I clearly had an unrepentant attitude towards it, even though I brought myself to them. I was guilty but not repentant is basically what they thought. Reasonably enough. I wasn't particularly sorry, but I also knew I was living a double life, and that was unsustainable. So I said, so I took myself to them. And then I worked really hard to get reinstated, because I still believed it. I still believe it, but I just couldn't meet the standard. So then I got reinstated again.
How long time did you have to sit and be quiet? Did you get 6 months or 9 months or?
It was about 16 to 18 months.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah.
And you came there every week. Nobody talked to you. Nobody say hi and so on. For 16 months.
They just went. I applied multiple times. I can't remember how many times I applied. I would have applied maybe 3 months in, 6 months in, 9 months in, and 12 months in like 3-month intervals is when I would have applied to be reinstated. But yeah, it was over a year for sure.
Wow,
close to a year and a half.
And also for the listeners who doesn't understand what's going on here, that you apply for the same 3 elders that have been in this group with you and develops you, and then you write a letter and asking, can I be reinstated? And no, not this time. No, you have to come more, you have to show more. And then after over a year, you came back. So in that period of time, that's very interesting, Jonam, because I heard this story a lot of times also with some of my guests, that even though they know it's the truth, then they're still capable of doing porneia or immorality and so on. Did you have any guilt when you were with a girl and having sex, and afterwards you were, oh, sorry, Jehovah, and praying for forgiveness? How did you emotionally and mentally were capable to do that?
I tell you, we're very amazing creatures in terms of being able to tie ourselves in mental knots. So in my case, and maybe for other people this is different for other people. In my case, I would go meet the girl, we'd do whatever we did, and then afterwards I'd be like, I feel really good. Like this, I feel perfectly fine, and I've not been zapped by lightning, and I don't feel like I've done anything. For me, immoral is hurting someone, right? It's doing harm. And I don't feel like I've done that. And so I felt completely free of guilt. And then I was like, wow, I'm such a bad person. I'm so bad. I'm so sinful that my conscience isn't even working and I don't feel bad. So I felt guilty about not feeling guilty,
Yes.
which is kind of laughable.
It is, but I can recognize that. Sex is good, very good, but still you have this Jehovah's Witnesses indoctrination. You're not even allowed to masturbate. So it's two worlds, and still you can feel inside that it's actually a nice thing. I like having sex with other people, but it's strange. That's very interesting. Okay, so you got reinstated and took a decision from now on, I want to be pure for God, no sex outside the marriage, and things went on.
And that didn't work.
No?
So I made that decision, and during that time when I was trying to get reinstated, I ended up having a kind of forming a long distance relationship with a girl in Australia, and she was very, very supportive. We were very, it was a very good relationship, truth be told, and she supported me and was fine with me getting reinstated and all those things. Then shortly after I got reinstated, she came over to the UK to see me. And we were going to try and make things work and try and do things the Christian way and all of that. And that didn't work because I was a hormonal young guy, basically. So I was like, no, we'll go and commit more acts of porneia. And so almost immediately, within a couple of months after being reinstated, I ended up committing, sins again. And I felt so bad because there's this guilt, there's this shame, there's this feeling of I've worked really hard to get back in, and now I've at the first hurdle I've fallen and failed. So I was very down on myself to the point where after this quite big emotional breakdown, really, I ended up overdosing. I just raided a medicine cabinet and overdosed and ended up in hospital for a few days. And it was it was this real shame of not wanting to face it. So I didn't confess at that point. The elders asked me, they were kind of interrogating me to see if something had gone on. And I didn't want to tell them because I knew that I couldn't cope with being disfellowshipped and dealing with this relationship, which turned out to be a dumpster fire down the road. So I then, for about a year, I just led a complete double life. So in the congregation, in front of the elders, my JW friends, I was one person, and then behind closed doors, I was doing everything else.
Yeah. And a lot of people can recognize what you're telling right now. But in that period of time, was it also emotionally that you found out that I can live this double life, that you were going more and more away from the indoctrination because of what you saw in the other world, that this is not the truth?
I'm a reasonably intelligent person, I like to think. But in terms of this, when I'm telling this story, I'm like, God, I'm describing an absolute dumbass because for all that time, no, I still believed it, and the logic I had was it was very mathematical. I was thinking, well, this is the truth. This is how things are going to go. The world really hasn't got long. Armageddon's going to come in the next sort of 12 to 18 months. And if I get disfellowshipped, well, the first time it took me around 18 months to get reinstated. So I'd be disfellowshipped and, cast out at the point where Armageddon comes. So I'm done. And so I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll keep going in the hopes of, trying to find some redemption. But at the same time, I'm going to do what I can do to enjoy the time I've got here and at least get my emotional and physical and social needs met while I'm in the world. So it was a really messed up mindset.
But were you not afraid in that period of time, whenever you saw in the news that there was an earthquake or whatever it was? Oh, it's a sign, I'm going to die in Armageddon. Did you have one of these experiences where you
Yeah.
wake up in the night and being afraid of Armageddon
Yeah, regularly.
regularly.
And the mindset that got taught to me as a young teenager. So I mentioned how, around the age of 10 to 12, I was very worried about the Great Tribulation and all of this stuff, because I started to learn about history, right? And so you don't have to look too far back in history to see how horrible humans can be. And then I thought, well, if this tribulation is going to be worse than anything else in history, this is going to be awful. And so the mindset I got taught was very much like a soldier. It's like, if you're in this hell situation, then you just have to, being frightened and giving into your fear is not going to be helpful. You just stiff upper lip is what we say in the UK. You have a stiff upper lip and you soldier on, and you just face it like a man, kind of thing. And so when I had those fears, I was like, well, I'm going to look my executioner in the eye and be courageous about it and just accept my fate with dignity. So it's very, very dramatic.
When is the point when you find out finally, wow, this is not the truth, and begins your journey till where you are today?
So after that year of living a double life, I got myself back on track, as I decided to try and be a good Christian. And one thing led to another, into another. I got disfellowshipped again because I went to the elders to confess about one thing, and they coerced and interrogated me and said, well, what about this year? You know, there was something off about you that year. And so then they coerced the information out of me and disfellowshipped me based on these things in the past. And I still kept going for another 18 months to 2 years. I was trying to get reinstated even then. So I kept trying, kept going, moved to London, kept trying to get reinstated there. And during that time was when I really started to have some realizations, where I was sitting there in the audience, reading the Bible, looking at what was being taught and what was being practiced, and saying, well, these don't match up. What I'm experiencing in the judicial process, what I'm seeing in the policies, does not match any of the stuff that Jesus is talking about. So they're lying. And so the more time passed, the more I realized I would have to be a hypocrite in order to get reinstated, in order to uphold these things. I would be upholding something I don't actually believe in. And so there was a big situation came up in my life, just a family situation, which meant I just could not focus on going to meetings as well as deal with this. And so I stopped attending. But it was not until the beginning of last year, when the pandemic started, where I actually started to do the research to prove that it was not the truth. I just kind of ignored it. I didn't prove it or disprove it. But I deep down assumed it was true. And every time I saw something on the news, it was very triggering and very scary. But I just pushed it out of my mind, and I was busy getting on with my life. It was still there. And it's like, when you have a splinter and you put some pressure on it and it stabs you. It was like that. So it wasn't until the beginning of last year when I really started to do the research. It took me a night. I was up reading until 4 or 5 in the morning, and I was done. I was like, okay, this is not the truth. Where do I go from here?
Where did you start? How did you do your research?
I think the first, where would it have been? I think it was the XJW Reddit, the subreddit, was a good resource. And from there, I found Crisis of Conscience and also JW Facts. And I just couldn't argue with any of it. I couldn't disprove any of it. It was all very sound, very logical, and confirmed doubts that I'd had for long time, but pushed to one side.
Yeah. So it's very fast, only a little over a year ago that you decided to leave mentally.
Yeah. So I was POMI. I was physically out, mentally in, really until the beginning of last year, which is very strange in terms of my timeline, because I've been a hypnotherapist for 5 years, so so during that time I've had this kind of screwy 2 timelines going on. So I was deeply into psychology throughout my teenage years. As soon as I started working, I started paying to go on courses to learn NLP, influence hypnotherapy, and I ended up working on cruise ships as a hypnotist. And then from there, I ended up joining a behavioral profiling team, instructors team with applied behavior research. So there's this very strange parallel timeline throughout that. And it's like, as soon as I realized at the beginning of last year, okay, the religion's false, I had all of these skills to help myself, but also I looked around the rest of the community and I saw so many of us struggle with the same things. Fear of Armageddon, the anxiety, the grieving the living after being rejected by our family and our friends. And so I saw these common themes that I struggled with, that I had to do work on myself for. And so it was a real inspiration moment for me to say, wow, I can actually be helpful. I can actually use all of this training that I've done to help people with a problem that's close to my heart as well.
That's very interesting, because I know of one person, one elder, even an elder here in Denmark. It's not just a rumor. I know a person who knows him personally. That the story is that besides being a Jehovah's Witnesses, he's studying at the university to be a psychologist. And I'm just thinking, if you're studying as a Jehovah's Witnesses, even an elder, to be a psychologist, there must be something in the studies that make you think, maybe these methods for indoctrinating people and manipulating, that's what I see inside my own religion. And even you also, you know a lot about psychology and hypnotherapy, but during your studies, you didn't think, well, this is relative for me as a Jehovah's Witness. It was like you parted it.
I deliberately wanted to learn it so I could be better at being a Jehovah's Witness.
Wow.
So I could be more influential on the ministry. And so I was sharing these things with my the cool Jehovah's Witness friends I had. And the ministry school book is just a sales training manual. I'm like, look, if we're going to be influencing people, I might as well have the decency to do a good job of it. And so that was that was how I justified it. I thought, well, I'm curious about creation. The brain, the mind is a part of creation. So I just found it fascinating. And the way that people, and so your friend or the elder that you know, how we tend to justify it when we believe the religion is that, well, it's, if we're using tactics to influence people to stay in, well, that's potentially saving their life. So it's, the end justifies the means, to quote Machiavelli. You can even see the manipulation taking place and say, well, it's in a good cause, so I'm fine with it. Or I'm a little uncomfortable about it, but what do I know? The governing body knows better than me, and they're being directed by God, who definitely knows better than me. Who am I to question God? And so that's how they get us to bypass our own consciences, our own critical thinking.
Yes, totally. And that brings us to the present time. Now we need to talk about your profession and your 12 steps program and so on. I have been watching and looking at your Facebook profile and your page and your website. It's very, very interesting. Let's take one thing, the Religion Rehab Group program. in 12 weeks. What's that about?
So at the beginning of, well, it was last summer I put a survey out to see in the ex-Jehovah's Witness community, what are people struggling with? What are the common themes, questions, challenges, to give me an idea of what was relevant. I had hundreds of responses within the first week or so. It was a huge response. And what was really crazy was that I saw just so many different people, different countries saying the exact same things, sharing the exact same problems and challenges, and so many of those things that I'd faced as well. And so over this time, I've been working with people and have hypnotherapy clients, and I realized that I'm solving the exact same kind of problems again and again, and they're coming up in a very specific order. And so I thought, well, it just makes sense to put a system together so that then people have something to work through. And that's where the program was really born, because we have 3 different areas of life that we often struggle with after leaving the organization. And the first one is our mind. And it's like our mind is occupied territory. There's this tyrant or this tyrannical force from the organization and maybe family that's still in there, still talking to ourselves badly, still believing either the doctrines in terms of, well, the world's going to end, so what's the point of making goals? Or the more discreet, the insidious things like believing I'm undeserving of kindness, or I'm inherently corrupt and sinful and wrong, and people will abandon me, or people are out to get me. Things like that. So we need to get that out of our mind and get the ability to upgrade our beliefs, not just about religion, but about our own selves, about our life. The second area is our emotions, is our heart, because it's an overwhelming emotional experience to go through that, from the being in and thinking that everyone's going to be destroyed at Armageddon, to going through the judicial process. If you've been through that, you know how traumatizing it is. From my experience, being disfellowshipped sucked. Being disfellowshipped and trying to get reinstated was even worse. And anyone who's been through that knows just how horrible it is. You write the letters, you send them, you're waiting to hear from them, then you go and meet, and they're going to tell you the decision, and it takes days, sometimes weeks.
And also the questions they ask you, especially young girls, and where did he touch you?
Yeah.
Did you have orgasm and so on? You probably had the same questions. And
yeah. There's like, did you enjoy it? I thought, what do you think? Of course I did.
That's
no chump. No, I was a chump because I answered the question like that. But the emotional experience of that is overwhelming, and no one should go through that. And then there's the grief of how do you get over the loss of these relationships? It's like everyone who was your support network has suddenly died, except they're not dead. They're just choosing to be dead to you. And so there's that extra layer of confusion. So how do you work through that? And that emotional aspect is right there in the middle of the program. And then at the end is where we start to look at the outside world, which is how you relate to the world. So this could be in business, this could be in terms of setting your goals and looking to the future and feeling optimistic and motivated about it. Another challenge is that lots of people who leave an organization like this end up in another situation that's similar. Maybe not a religion, but very often a narcissistic or abusive relationship, where they're being treated the same way that they were treated by the religion, but it's a person treating them that way. Or they have friendships where these friends are taking, and then this person is just a utility. So learning how to relate to the outside world in a healthy way, how to see the red flags in people, how to have healthy boundaries. The reason we put that at the end is because until we get our mind and our emotions healed from all of the JW programming, then I could give you a word-for-word script on exactly how to how to set a healthy boundary, or exactly how to connect with someone and make a genuine connection. I could give you a word-for-word script for that, but without the mental and the emotional healing, it wouldn't work. So that's what we focus on, and that's the order we focus on it in.
I'm thinking about it. Sounds so good, Jonam. But if you have to have a person like that and going through the program, I think that maybe you need to be mentally ready. You need to know that it's not the truth. And I'm thinking about what would you say to a person that is a PMO? He's physically POMI. He's physically out, but mentally in. He would say to you during that program, no matter what you say, I'm still convinced that God has a discreet slave, faithful, and it's the governing body. I still believe in Armageddon. It's said in the Bible, and he read the words and so on. So he's still very much affected by the indoctrination, but then emotionally he's fucked up. Sorry to say that. If a person comes to you and he say, mostly what I've been taught in the Watchtower is correct, how can you change that person's mind?
So how I usually approach that is that I tell people to do the research that they've been putting off doing, and to answer the questions that they've been ignoring. Because all of us, when we were in, we had questions. There were things that bothered us, and either we didn't answer we didn't ask the questions, or we were not satisfied with the answers, and we kind of forced ourselves to accept it, even though it wasn't quite right. And so what I do is I don't really convert people out. I don't say, well, do this, or look at that thing, because I think people need to make up their own mind. And plus, there are just people who are so much better at it than me. Lloyd Evans has a huge amount of resources. That there's just so much online where people are actual experts in the religion and all the doctrines and all the ways that it's corrupt and all the child abuse cover-ups. That's not an area I'm an expert in. I did enough research for me, but I'm not like a counter ministry person so what I do, if someone's in that place, I say, look, ask all the questions, do the research, do your due diligence, the same way as if you were going to make any big investment. You do your research and you make sure that you're investing in the right place. Then the point where my work becomes relevant is where someone says, okay, I've done the research, I realize it's all BS. I realize it's not the truth, but I can't get these Armageddon dreams out of my head. I'm grieving my family members who I can't speak to anymore. I'm missing my niece growing up. I'm unable to set goals for the future because I've just never been in the habit. I've only been told to wait for God and to wait for this Armageddon thing. And that's the point where people are like, I want to make this progress and I want to recover, but I'm just not quite sure how. And that's where I've put this together with the intention of supporting that.
It sounds very good. And I have one question more that is about. I think it's a topic that you also talked about in Facebook or somewhere, where I read it and said, that's totally true. My experience with a lot of people I speak with from the XJW community in Denmark is that a lot of people leave Jehovah's Witnesses, and then in a few months or a few years, they join another religion. And I will not be the judge, but I remember when I was a Jehovah's Witness, I was an elder, and when I said I do not believe in this, I did my own research at that time, and one of the other elders that was a presiding overseer at that time, he's called another thing today, but he said to me, but Frank, if this is not the truth, what is? And I remember I told him directly, I do not know what else is the truth, but I know this is a lie. I haven't found the truth ever since. But I think it's a typical thing from ex-Jehovah's Witnesses coming out. Okay, this is not the truth, but there must be another truth out there. And then they join the Mormons or Islam or whatever. And you talked about that. Be careful, be aware of trying to find another truth shortly after you leave Jehovah's Witnesses. Can you tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, I love the quote, which is to love the ones who seek the truth and run from the ones who have found it.
Yes.
And I love that quote. And I don't know who said it originally, but it's not an original Jonam classic. But it's so true. And the thing is that when we were we got conditioned to be addicted to certainty. That feeling of knowing, well, here's the truth about humanity. Here's the truth of my place in human history, universal sovereignty. Here's how I should speak. Here are the words I'm not allowed to say. Here's how I'm supposed to dress. These are the people I can speak to. These are the good guys, those are the bad guys. Everything was just clearly labeled, and it's simple. And it was wrong, but it was simple. And it was, and that simplicity is comfortable compared to the confusion of having to figure things out for yourself. Especially when you've not been practicing how to do that. It's like the first time you ever do a push-up or a pull-up, if you've never done one before, the first time you try to do it, it's going to be an absolute nightmare. The first 10 times you do it, it's probably going to be a struggle. So it's the same with our own independence. So what people tend to become is, the English word is ideologues, which could be another religion. But something I noticed is that it doesn't just apply to religions, but what it is where you find a group or you find a belief system which labels everything in the same way. This is good, this is bad, this is acceptable, this is not. This is how you should dress, this is how you should speak. These are the special kinds of words you should use. These are the viewpoints that you disagree with without even analyzing them. And so then we slip into this psychological uniform, a bit like a hermit crab. You know those crabs that are on the seabed, and they go and crawl into the shell of another creature because they don't grow their own shells properly. Or sometimes they go into sea garbage, and that's what a lot of these ideologies are. And so having the goal of, instead of trying to find absolute truth, is continuing to search. And what you'll find is there is some truth in various different places. But any one that claims to say this is the only piece of the puzzle you need is probably, they're working to an agenda that is in their interests, not yours. And so that's why I encourage people, even with the work I'm offering, I'm like, all the way through it, I'm saying, look, read these books by other people, look at these, this resource, or investigate that field of research, and expand your horizons. So that rather than someone saying to you, here's the map that you have to live by, it's more about developing the skills to make your own map. And then along the way, you'll find other like-minded people. Because that's the other motivator, right? It's certainty and it's community. So we get that comfort from being around like-minded people. The problem is if the ideology comes first, and if we start sacrificing ourselves on the altar of a substitute belief system, then the friendships and the connections we make will be conditional to our membership in that belief system, just like when we were witnesses. So it's uncomfortable, but learning to get comfortable with being a little bit confused, and to turn that confusion into curiosity, so that then you can find the right way for you. That will get you far further than just signing up for the next cult that comes knocking on your door.
Well put. So hold it by trying to find another truth, trying to go through the 12-week program first with Jonam, and then doing individual help. You mentioned, Jonah, we're going to round up here in a few minutes, but you've been working as a hypnotherapist. During that program, are you using that also? Can a former Jehovah's Witnesses sit like we're sitting here, and then you can hypnotize them going back in years in their childhood? Or is that a completely other thing? You don't use hypnotherapy for this program?
Yeah, I use hypnotherapy in the program. It's not the only thing we're using. There are lots of other exercises, there are journaling exercises, group calls, the community support aspect. But hypnotherapy is something that I use throughout it. And so you can do it either on a pre-recorded session where you put headphones in, you lay down, you relax, and you follow along, or we can do it live like this. Even before the pandemic, I was working online because all my clients were in America and Australia and everywhere else. So the way it works is it's not mind control. A lot of people leaving the organization still have those fears of things like meditation or mindfulness or yoga and hypnotherapy because of what they told us, which is that you're opening your mind, you're handing over control to another person, and you're opening up yourself to the demons if they want to come in, which is all nonsense. It's not true. It's more like when you go to the gym and you have a personal trainer who says, hey, do this exercise in this way. Just them saying that won't build your muscles for you. How great would that be? But no, you actually have to do the exercise. You actually have to follow those instructions in order for the effect to take place. And so what this is, it's giving instructions on mental exercises that you can do to relax physically, to relax emotionally, to relax mentally, and to feel that feeling of peace and comfort. And from finding that inner peace, we can then begin to work directly with your subconscious mind. And just very briefly, because this is an entire, I could talk about this for days, but a very brief thing is that your conscious mind is the bit you think with. So you've been conscious of what we're saying right now. You're conscious of the words and the meanings. You weren't conscious of the amount of times you've blinked over the past 60 seconds. You weren't conscious of the temperature in your left pinky finger until I said it just now. And now your attention's gone to your left pinky finger and you're aware of the temperature, right? It was still there. The finger was still there. You were still blinking all that time, but it was being taken care of by your unconscious mind. And so that's where all of these beliefs are stored. That's where all of these old programs are stored. And so the personal development work that we often do is focusing on the conscious mind, but that's the smallest part of us. That's the weakest part of us. And so with hypnotherapy, what we're doing is getting to the place where you can drop your conscious awareness into that much larger space of your unconscious mind. And from there, I've got a whole host of tools, techniques, strategies that are proven that help you to work with your own mind, that help you to take it from being hostile, occupied territory to being your own sovereign territory. And from there, you can start to build these new skills, healthy coping mechanisms, so that when stress comes your way, you know how to deal with it. Or if grief comes up, or if there's a triggering thing on the news, or the holidays are coming up and you're kind of anxious about celebrating or not celebrating and how you're going to do it, is giving you the skills inside your own mind that then sends a ripple effect all the way out through your life. So that's the way it works. It's not at all about all the things that the organization told it was about.
Interesting. And I think it's very important that you mentioned that it's not that you are giving totally control as a client to you and you can control me. I'm totally in control with myself. You are helping. It's not like I'm totally away and you can, as a hypnotherapist, make me say as a chicken or whatever you combine with when you hear about hypnotherapist. I'm thinking about all the shows where the
Yeah.
hypnotherapist can make people do crazy things because he's actually controlling them, and then he say 3, 2, 1, and then they are themselves again. It's nothing like that when you're having the sessions. No.
That's comedy hypnosis.
Yes.
And a large part of that is down to people who are kind of exhibitionist, or people who have that deep down desire to comply. And the way you do that is, if you're the hypnotist doing a stage show, you're eliminating the people who are less suggestible. So people who are not likely to go along with that, you're removing them from the show. So they'll bring people up and then send people down, and so that then by the time they get to doing that crazy stuff, they'll have 10 to 15 people on the stage who have been selected because they're the most compliant, they're the most cooperative people in the room, and they'll create a good show, and it will be fun, and it will be comedic, and everyone will have a good time and feel good afterwards. So that's entertainment, right? That's what Hollywood shows us. But that's not therapy.
No, it's not. Just that people are listening to this and say, "Oh no, am I giving myself over?" We did that once with the governing body. We gave our minds to the governing body.
Yes.
We don't want to do that again to anyone. Anybody.
Yeah.
That's good, Jonam. That's about it.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to talk with you. And if people want to hear more about your program, you can just advertise here. It's your website name and Yeah, the
best place to find it is religionrehab.co.uk. And that's the website. Also, I'm very active on Facebook, which is my name, Jonam Tullio Ross. And then I have that private Facebook group, which is where I'll share more personal stuff on my personal profile and more broad speaking things. In the Facebook group is where I'll dive more into the details and the psychological information. So they're both different things. Join, send me a friend request on Facebook, or send an email to jonam@religionrehab.co.uk. And it's always a pleasure to talk.
Good. I can also, in my YouTube video, putting it up. So now if people are watching now, they can see it on the screen. So
wonderful.
So that's
Thank
good.
you.
So thank you very much, Jonam, for talking with me in this program.
Thank you.
I wish you good luck in the future, helping people coming out of toxic religions.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing, Frank. You're doing a really great job here, and sharing great resources, and your voice sounds great. It's so relaxing. I'm like, I feel so comfortable here. So thank you for what you're doing as well.
Thank you very much, Jonah. Bye-bye.
Cheers.